Hi, welcome to Katie Rants, and on this episode, I am going to talk about contact tracing. So, if you've been following my blog at prolifeproliberty.tumblr.com, you've seen me post about this a lot. So, some of this is going to be stuff you've already heard, but if the video format works better for you or you haven't seen those posts, here's kind of my summary of what I've been saying. So there's a lot of push right now for contact tracing, and you see it all over the news. You see it all over all the articles about how contact tracing is our way to reopen the economy safely, how contact tracing is the way forward. And these are really concerning to me for a few reasons. But what's really, really concerning is now Apple and Google are pushing out contact tracing software onto your phone, in some cases without your knowledge or consent. So at the very least, we know that Apple has pushed out iOS 13.5, which puts contact tracing on your phone. There is conflicting reports right now about which phones are getting that update. So my phone is an iPhone 7, and the 13.5 update does not list contact tracing as something, or exposure notification is what they're calling it. It does not list that as a feature of this update. However, other people with iPhone 7s have said that they are getting that. So there's kind of conflicting information right now. But the point is that whether you have an Android or an iPhone or whatever kind of phone you have, you need to be looking to see, is contact tracing being pushed onto your phone without your knowledge and or consent? And are you being given the option to not install it on your phone? Because even if you're turning it off, like there's a switch to turn it off, that doesn't guarantee anything. That could simply be cosmetic. It could simply be, hey, it looks like it's off, but it's still working, and it just won't tell you. It just won't notify you. It'll notify other people, or it might notify the government. And that's what we're going to get into next, is why contact tracing is such a problem. But if you haven't done so already, please turn off automatic updates. Normally, automatic updates are a good thing because they help keep your device secure. But in this case, you do not want this installing without you having the opportunity to research it and understand exactly what you're putting on your phone. Because there's some real problems with this technology and with the entire concept of contact tracing. So the way some people will explain contact tracing is, oh, okay, you get COVID-19, or you get whatever virus we're tracing, in this case COVID-19. You get the virus, you test positive, and traditionally contact tracing involves a contact investigator, right? Coming up and interviewing you and asking you about where you've been, who you've been in contact with, who you've been close to, especially for extended periods of time, in the last couple of weeks. With the understanding that if you are testing positive now, you've probably had it for at least a week or more, and you may have spread it to others without knowing it. So this, in theory, sounds great, especially because you want that person who you were in contact with to know that they may have been exposed. They need to know that, especially if they are at risk, because they may need to make sure that their doctor knows or whatever. And they may themselves want to stay home and limit their exposure to other people, because they don't want to get somebody else sick. So in theory, this is a great idea. And we do something similar with STDs. So if you test positive for an STD, you are expected, this is the difference, you are expected to inform anybody who you were sexually active with in whatever period of time the doctor says you may have been contagious. You were supposed to inform them that they may be exposed as well and that they should get tested. So that is a different concept than what we're talking about here. Because for number one, that is specific to, okay, you test positive, you can count, you can identify, okay, here's all the people who I may have exposed, and you are able to tell them, and you don't have to report that to the government. So this is the key thing. If in that method of contact tracing, if I test positive for something and then I go tell all the people who might have been exposed, that's between me and them, right? I'm not posting it on social media, here's all the people who've been exposed, and I'm not telling the government. I'm not calling up the public health department and saying, hey, I exposed these people. Okay, that's key, because the government shouldn't be involved in this aspect of it. If it's simply a matter of letting people know that they may have been exposed, That we can adopt that model of, hey, I test positive and I go inform all the people who I was in contact with. I call them up, I email them, or whatever. Um, or even I post on social media, hey, I tested positive if I hung out with you in the last week. I could even do a general thing like that if I want to, but that's my choice, right? How I transmit that information, right? And I don't have to tell, again, the government. So one of the concerns with contact tracing the way that it's being proposed right now is that public health departments, aka the government, will be informed about your contacts, right? And in some cases they're claiming, oh no, they don't do that, they just notify the people. I don't trust that with software, and I definitely do not trust that with government hired contact investigators, because we have already seen evidence from some local governments that they want to do quarantine centers. Essentially, they want to have quarantine facilities for people to go and be isolated if they test positive, especially in what they've said, what's been kind of said and then walked back because there was public backlash to it. Ventura County, California, this is, kind of my prime example. They walked it back because people had backlash. So that doesn't mean they're not going to do it. It just means they're going to be quieter about it. What they said was that if you test positive or if you were exposed, so this is the key thing. It doesn't just mean if you test positive. It means if you're exposed and we think you might have it and you can't successfully isolate in your own home. So let's say you live in a or 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and it's you and your spouse and your kids in this house, and you have 1 bathroom, you can't properly isolate from the rest of your family because you only have the 1 bathroom, because you'd have to share that bathroom, and that's, they're concerned about transition there. So what they said is that in that case, you would then be placed in a quarantine facility. Okay, so we understand that this is a problem. Then we have Washington State, which posted they put a job posting up on governmentjobs.com, advertising for essentially social workers, or people who were licensed at a certain level of social work, to work in quarantine, emergency quarantine centers, caring for children with COVID-19. The implication there that children are being placed in centers, apparently without parents or guardians. Now, there is one explanation that this was children in the foster care system, which still then we have foster parents, especially foster parents who are fostering to adopt, who are trying to adopt that child, who are then having that child taken away from them. Maybe, there are good and bad foster parents, right? But there are good foster parents who are loving foster parents who are, doing this because they love those children and they're trying to adopt those children in many cases. And then those children will be taken away and then placed in a quarantine facility, in a general kind of child care facility with a few social workers, versus that family environment, which is so key for foster. It's the reason why we have a foster system. It's the reason why we don't have as much anymore orphanages, and we don't have as many of those kind of facilities anymore. We do have some, but they're less common now because we understand that the family environment is the best environment for a child. And so to take children out of those family environments, even if we're talking about foster children, taking foster children out of those family environments and putting them in quarantine centers does not seem like best practice, right? If we're thinking about the whole child and not just the concept of this virus. We have to understand there's other things going on besides this virus. Right? This virus is not the only thing that exists right now. We have other concerns that we have to take into account. So regardless of why they're hiring those social workers, the concept of putting people into quarantine facilities, right, is a very concerning concept. Anytime the government starts putting people into camps, we need to be, whoa, hold on. What are you doing? We need some oversight here. We need some accountability here. And we need to not put people into camps. It's, if you've got emergency shelters for people who are displaced by a disaster, sure, I wouldn't go into one. But if you needed it, it's there. I would avoid going to one of those at all costs because they do not have a good history. But having that available for the people who really, really need it. But the concept of the government putting people into quarantine facilities is really, really concerning. And the concept of the government being told who you may have been in contact with if you test positive, and then you have to give up all your contacts to the government, and the government is going to go to those people, whether it's a public health official or a contact tracer or whoever it is. They're going to go to that household and inform them they're exposed. They're not going to say who exposed them, theoretically. But that, to me, is even more concerning. So let's say, I'm here, I'm in a one bedroom, one bathroom apartment with my husband, right? If I were to test positive, right? I can't isolate from my husband. Let's say I don't even test positive. Let's say, right now, a public health official, a contact investigator comes and knocks on my front door. I open the door. They show a badge or something. I open the door and I say, hi, can I help you? And they tell me that I've been exposed. So they're not going to tell me who exposed me. So I have no way to verify. That this really happened, right? They come and tell me that I was exposed, and then they ask me who else lives in the apartment. Do I lie to them and say I live alone? Because they may already have the information that my husband's here. Do I lie and risk getting caught in that lie? Or do I say, yes, my husband lives here? And they say, well, how many bathrooms do you have? And I say 1. Do I lie? Because they can get the floor plan from the apartment complex, right? They don't have to get the information from me. They can get it elsewhere. I tell them I have 1 bathroom. Well, they don't want, in their mind, if I stay in my 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment with my husband, I'm going to get him sick. And now, should I actually test positive for COVID-19? Yeah, I'm going to try and not get my husband sick. I'm going to try and isolate to the best of my ability. Even if it means he goes and stays with my parents because they're healthy and they're not at high risk, but my husband's at higher risk than I am, or than even my parents are. So if I were to test positive, he may go stay with them. That may be safer for him, and I may isolate here. But they're not going to give me that option. What they're going to tell me is that because I'm in a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment, they're not going to say, oh yeah, your husband can go stay with your parents, because they don't want that either, because what if he's exposed and he gets them sick? So they're not going to want that either. They're going to want us isolated from each other, and they're going to tell me I have to come with them to their emergency quarantine center, right? And so I'm going to be in this position of, I may refuse. Chances are they're not coming that initial visit. They're not going to come armed, but could be the next one. The next knock on my door could be the police. And I could be taken from my home and put in an emergency quarantine center because they told me that I was exposed. Now, I have no way of verifying that I was truly exposed because that system is wide open to abuse from a government that wants to silence, opposition. And I've been speaking out, on my blog. I've got 4,000 some followers, so it's not like I'm not Ben Shapiro, but I've been speaking up. I've been making noise about the government overreach and contact tracing and all these problems. If they wanted to silence me, all they have to do is come and tell me I was exposed. They don't have to prove that. There's no way to prove to me that I was exposed. Not without violating somebody else's privacy. So under the privacy protection, they're going to come and tell me I was exposed and make me go to a quarantine center. Where then they can, once I'm there, they can take my phone, cut me off from internet. They can cut off my communication. And I have no way to tell people what's going on. Right? And I stop. And all of a sudden I'm quiet. I go silent. How many people could they do that to? Where you have no idea if you were really exposed or if the government has just come and told you that you are because you're in opposition to their agenda. You could see it happening. Everyone says it won't happen here. It'll happen here. It can happen anywhere. anywhere that the government is given that kind of power. See, we have a constitution, right? We have constitutional limits on our government to prevent these kinds of things from happening. But if they just step right over the Constitution and don't give it a second glance, or if they say, well, there's nothing specific in the Constitution about contact tracing, so therefore, right? So I cannot be deprived of life or liberty or any of my rights without due process of law. Liberty, right? To be deprived of liberty without due process of law. There is no due process in somebody showing up telling me I was exposed and telling me I have to go to a quarantine center. Not to mention the fact that if I was exposed but I didn't actually get it and then they send me to a quarantine center, yeah, then I'm going to get it. You know? So I'd rather not go to a quarantine center if I don't actually have it, if I haven't actually tested positive. So this whole concept of contact tracing is just wide open for abuse, right? And then now we come back to, okay, let's say things are turned around a little bit, and let's say I tested positive. Let's say I got some symptoms that matched up with COVID-19. Told my doctor, and I was like, yeah, go get tested. I go get tested, not positive, right? Somehow I picked it up. And then the contact investigator shows up. You know, I've gotten my test results positive. The contact investigator comes and says, okay, I need a list of everybody you've been in contact with over the past 2 weeks or whatever it is. Do I give them that list? The answer is no. The answer is no. I do not give them that list, because if I give them that list, it may sound like they're going to phrase it as, well, we need to make sure those people are informed and make sure that they're safe and see if they need to be tested. And no. Because if I give them that list of names, I'm giving up the names of everyone I was in contact with, and I'm sending the government to their door, right? I am inflicting on them what I just described could happen to me, where somebody could come up and tell me that I've been exposed and I need to go to a quarantine center. I'm inflicting that on every single person I name. I'm telling every single person I name, I'm sending the government to their door, to knock on their door and tell them that they're exposed and that they need to isolate from their family, and that if they can't do that successfully, they need to go to a quarantine center. Or some local governments could just skip over the whole isolate in your home thing and say, nope, we're just going to go ahead and put you in a quarantine center. They could do that. You can't see some of these governors, especially these governors that are extending the lockdowns and shutting down churches and arresting people for violating social distancing. You can't see them rounding people up and putting them in quarantine centers. Think about it. Okay. So if a contact tracer, contact investigator, whatever they want to call themselves, comes up and asks me for my contacts, I'm going to say no. Or I'll make something up and I'll say, no, I've been totally isolated for the last 2 weeks. Don't know how I got it. Haven't been anywhere. And so, whatever. But I'm just going to say no. No, I haven't. I'm not going to give you my contacts. I refuse. I'm going to refuse to cooperate. And even if that means that I, get put in a quarantine center as a punishment or whatever the case may be, I'm not giving up my contacts. Because I'm not going to inflict that on somebody else. Now, I may then call that person, right? I may call that person and try to use the most secure method of communication that I can, try to avoid anything that, could be tracked. Although I know they can probably listen in, but if at all possible, try to communicate to that person without necessarily, or I might tell my husband and may have, have him go make some phone calls or whatever the case may be, find a way to avoid, alerting public health officials, but still be able to communicate to those people who I was in contact with that they may be exposed, because I want them to know. They should know. Or maybe it's simply a matter of posting on my, if I test positive and the government already knows, I may just go ahead and post it on social media and say, hey, by the way, I was exposed, or I tested positive. If you hung out with me recently, you may be exposed. You might want to get tested. I may do that. And that way I communicate to everybody I was in contact with without telling the government who that is. Right? But that's my decision to make. How I'm going to communicate with those people. Who, how do I let them know in a way that doesn't put them in a tough situation? right? And that's what's so key, is the government doesn't need to be involved in this. It doesn't. And so this whole concept of contact tracing, this whole concept of, the government needs to sit and track down every single person who has it and who their contacts were, and test all of them and then track down their contacts. It's nonsense. If we were talking about Ebola, okay, if we were talking about a hemorrhagic fever, sure. But we're talking about a virus that has a less than 1% mortality rate, where we have specific populations that we know are vulnerable and we can protect those populations. We do not need to treat this as though it is the bubonic plague. We actually need herd immunity. We need the young, healthy population, the population that is not exceptionally vulnerable. We need them to have antibodies for this. Now, those that are vulnerable, we need to keep them safe, right? And, my husband's one of those who is vulnerable. And so I have concerns. But at the same time, at this point, we have therapeutic medications that are showing promise. So even if, my husband's vulnerable, he's not as vulnerable as some. He has a weakened immune system, but it's not completely gone. Some people have no immune system, especially if they're on chemotherapy, that sort of thing. But if my husband gets it, he may get severe symptoms. But we have good medications, especially we're seeing the hydroxychloroquine, the anecdotal evidence coming from doctors that are prescribing it to their patients is showing that when it is prescribed early, kind of essentially the first sign of symptoms or the first diagnosis, that it's really making a huge difference. And the one study that said that it wasn't helping or whatever was, first of all, a poorly done study, and they've already shown that it was poorly done. But also that, and that it was, the numbers were weird or whatever, but also that it was showing that the patients it was being used on were the patients who were already you were pretty close to not making it anyway, and then they give them the medication, they still don't make it. Well, yeah, that's one thing we need to know. Hey, is this a miracle cure for somebody who's been on a ventilator for 10 days? No, it's not. But is it a treatment for somebody who's just started to show symptoms or just been diagnosed, or even been exposed and is, we're trying to prevent them from getting it? Does it work in that way? And the answer appears to be yes. The answer appears to be those patients that either have milder symptoms or are just beginning to show symptoms early on in their illness, that it's working for them. And yet we have a doctor in Dallas, right? Dr. Lozano. And she's been prescribing it to patients, and she's been seeing amazing success with it. She's been seeing patients completely turn around in their illness and make full recoveries. And so she's been prescribing it to patients. She's been working with COVID patients. She's got this long line of people who want to come to her because they have COVID, and they know that she's doing a great job with it. And the pharmacy stopped letting her prescribe it. They stopped filling her prescriptions. Why? Right? Why would you do that when she's having success? Why wouldn't you let a doctor who's having success continue to use a medication we've had for a long time that's very inexpensive, right? We know exactly what the risks and the contraindications and all of that stuff. We know those things, right? It's not a mystery drug. It's not a brand new drug that we've never seen before. We have testing to know the safety of it. The question right now is, how effective is it? And so far it's showing to be effective, at least in anecdotal evidence. We need more studies and we need more evidence. But if my husband got COVID-19, I would want him to have hydroxychloroquine. Assuming there were no counterindications, we'd have to look at counterindications, see if there's any reason he couldn't. But if there's no reason he can't, I would say yes, please, give it to him. Because it could save his life. And we're getting those therapeutics, we're getting those things together. And so it's not a death sentence. This virus is not a death sentence. And that's the thing, is a lot of the patients that have died were in nursing homes that were not prepared for this, and that did not have the right systems in place to take care of those patients. And we're seeing it especially in New York, where we're seeing that COVID patients were put in nursing homes, and with otherwise healthy patients, or otherwise at least not patients that didn't have COVID, We're seeing a lot of deaths are coming from that. So we're seeing that, with reasonable medical care and decent facilities, people are surviving this. People are beating it. So the concept that we have to do contact tracing, we have to prevent anybody from ever getting this, it's unrealistic and it's ridiculous. Most experts are predicting that this is going to be seasonal, like the flu. That we're going to get this coming back every flu season for the foreseeable future. It's in the population. We're not going to eliminate this from the population. It's not going to happen. And really, right now, the mortality rate is getting closer and closer to looking like the mortality rate for the flu. And part of that is because we have therapeutics. We understand better, doctors understand better how to treat it, just like the flu. People get the flu. People get very, very sick from the flu. People die from the flu. But we have therapeutics. We have antivirals that help people with flu. And for those people who are high risk, who are vulnerable, who get the flu and they get it severely, doctors are able to treat them. And we're getting to that point now with COVID-19 where we are able to treat it. And that's what will make it like the flu. People are saying, oh, it's not like the flu. It's more contagious than the flu, as far as we can see. But it looks to be like it's going to be treatable like the flu. We'll have a medication, whether it's hydroxychloroquine or some combination of hydroxychloroquine and some other medication. Maybe we end up with something customized that's specific for COVID-19. Right now, the hydroxychloroquine seems to be working, but maybe we come up with something that's a little more tailored. And it'll be like, you get Theraflu or whatever it is, or Tamiflu, you get you go to the doctor, you get tested, you get the Tamiflu, you take it and you feel better. Right? So we have to stop thinking of this as something that we're going to get rid of, and we need to start thinking of it as something that we're going to adapt to, and that we're going to be able to treat people who get it so they don't die. And we need to be focusing our efforts on that and not violating people's liberty and privacy out of fear. So I say all this to say that contact tracing is not the answer. It's a violation of privacy. And when we talk about the contact tracing apps and the software, the idea that tech companies are going to say, hey, we're just going to go ahead and put this on your phone and essentially make you give up your contacts. Because with the contact tracing software and apps, with that kind of technology-driven contact tracing, you don't necessarily have a choice. It takes away your choice to say, no, I'm not going to give up my contacts. It does it for you. And they're saying, oh, it's not going to track your location. It's going to track who you're in contact with. How is that better? You're still going to have the list of people. There's going to be a list of people that I was in contact with. And you're telling me you're not going to give that to the government when they ask for it? And you're telling me that nobody's going to use that information to see who I'm associating with, who's getting together in groups, who might be planning, a protest, or maybe, discussing anti-government sentiments or whatever it is, stuff that's counter to the agenda. You don't think they're going to abuse that information? You don't think they're going to use it to shut down opposition? Really? You don't think that? So if you can avoid it, avoid getting any contact tracing software on your phone. If you've already gotten the update, at least go through your privacy settings and try to find a way to disable that function as best you can. It may not be enough, but just, do what you can and double check your privacy settings. A lot of times when you get a new update, your privacy settings all get reset to the default, which is on. Everything is on, location is on, microphone is on, camera is on. When that happens a lot of times when there's a new update. So you need to go, every time you get a new update on your phone, you need to go check your privacy settings and make sure that you're only allowing things like location access and camera and microphone for apps that truly need it. Like location access really should only be for your, like if you use a map GPS app. And even then I would say have it only when using, or have it, enable it when you're going to use it for directions and then disable it when you're done. Same thing with I know I do it like Uber Eats and delivery apps and stuff. They want your location so they know where to deliver. You can also enter an address. You don't necessarily even have to have your location on. You can enter an address, and or you can search by zip code a lot of times if you're trying to find a restaurant. You don't necessarily need to put your location in. So trying to avoid giving your location, giving your microphone access, camera access, all those sorts of things. Try to avoid giving those to any apps that you don't absolutely need to. And in most cases, even if they do need your location or they do need other data, you can do it temporarily when you're using that app and then turn it off. And just be very careful with that data and be protective of your privacy, be protective of your data. Because not only could it be used against you, we think about targeted advertising and all that stuff, it could be used against you, but now we're looking at where it could be used against others. They could take your data and use it against somebody else. So that is where we need to really think about this. If you were like, because that's how I was. I was like, you know what? They've already got all my information. They know who I am. They know what they know my views. They know that I don't follow their agenda, that kind of stuff. They already know that. What's the point? But now I'm looking at, wait a second. They could take my information. They could take my data and use it to go after somebody else. That's drawing that line there. So I'm going and turning off all my, all my privacy settings. I'm turning off all my location access, all my camera access, all that kind of stuff. And I have not updated the new iOS 13.5 update yet, even though mine says that it doesn't have contact tracing in the update. I don't believe that right now because other people with iPhone 7s are seeing that. So we're kind of looking into seeing where that goes. But it's really, really important that you don't download that update until we know more about, first of all, can it truly be disabled? Can the contact tracing truly be disabled, or is that just the appearance of it being disabled, or it just disables the notification of you, to disables notifying you, but doesn't necessarily disable the collection of the data. So that's what we need to determine. And that even for those of you where it doesn't say contact tracing in your update, you do want to make sure you're careful because they could be hiding it in there somewhere deep in the patch notes or whatever, or even not saying it in the patch notes. It could be somewhere in the software without even telling you. So we need to watch for that, and we need to have the people who understand this stuff better than I do, better, the tech people need to really be, we need to wait for them to kind of analyze this and look into it and dig into the code if they can and all that sort of thing before we download those updates. So just hold off on those updates. If you do get contacted by a contact tracer, don't give them anything, right? If you test positive for COVID-19, you tell people that you may have been in contact with, or post on social media or whatever you need to do to let people know, but don't give it to a contact tracer because you're putting somebody else at the mercy of the government, right? We're not going to give up people's names to the government. Like, we're not going to do that, okay? Because that goes downhill real fast. Again, that gets abused real fast. So thank you guys for watching. And this is kind of a longer video, but I mean, this is Katie Rants. I'm ranting. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.